Hi, welcome to Formula Citizen episode 2. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a race recap from the Formula One Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne. There's been a lot of hype around the 2025 season, and if race one is anything to go by, strap yourself in. It's going to be an incredible season. And so the theme for me from Melbourne was 4 seasons. It wasn't quite 4 seasons in one day, but it certainly was 4 seasons in 1 week. Really popular decision to return the first race of the season to Australia. It's how it used to be. And to be honest, it just felt right. It kind of had back to school vibes. The fact that the drivers come out early, they all arrive Saturday, Sunday to acclimatize and get over the jet lag. There was this kind of hype around that. There was a lot of content being pushed out from the teams around the drivers, around the lifestyle in Melbourne, and just being down under, which was really exciting as well. So yeah, perfect weather to start the week. Super hot, and then obviously Sunday we had a chaos, complete carnage on race day in terms of the weather. Super exciting and a great entertainment product. All right, I'm going to start on Monday. Breaking news that Oscar Piastri has extended his contract at McLaren until 2029, estimated to be £20,000 per season. If that figure's accurate, it would make him one of the top 5 highest paid drivers in Formula One. And when I heard this announcement on Monday, I immediately reflected on the question that was asked of Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull, during an interview on Netflix Drive to Survive, when the director asked him, if you could have either of the McLaren drivers signed with Red Bull, who would it be? And he immediately said Oscar. Immediately, it's just Oscar. Didn't even think about it. Clearly his stock is rising. Clearly he's been identified as a talent. And I think it's incredibly smart of McLaren to take him off the market, to sign him early and sign him on a long-term deal. He's got a longer-term contract than his teammate Lando Norris, who is, I believe, is expiring at the end of 2027. So this is consistent with what I spoke about in episode 1, right? Around Oscar's development curve. His long-term potential is greater than Lando Norris, and clearly McLaren see that in this signing. The other significant commercial announcement that was made earlier in the week was the extension of the Concord Agreement. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the commercial terms and arrangements around Formula One, or maybe you just started following Formula One, welcome. The Concord Agreement is a commercial rights agreement that binds Liberty Media as the owners of Formula One and the 10 teams, soon to be 11 teams. Now, this agreement was extended until 2030. And on top of that, Cadillac also had to pay a $450 million anti-dilution fee to the other teams. As I said in episode 1, the sport's got a really strong commercial base, fan growth, and reach. And that was demonstrated in this agreement. Consistent with this agreement was the extension of Stefano Domenicali's contract. He's the Formula One CEO. So clearly a lot of stability around the leadership of the organization, and great signs for the sport in terms of future growth. I wanted to touch on some comments from Helmut Marko before we talk about the action on the track. Helmut Marko is a senior advisor to the Red Bull Racing team, and he spoke about the 6 rookies that are on the grid. Now, if you recall in episode 1 of Formula Citizen, I spoke to the 6 new drivers that are entering the grid this season. He's given 4 of them a grade A. Kimi, Liam, Isaac, and Ollie. Disappointingly, he's given our own Australian talent, Jack Doohan, a grade C. The surprising one was Gabriel Bortoleto, the Brazilian Formula 2 champion who's just entered Formula 1. He gave him a grade B, right? And Gabby didn't remain silent. He spoke out in the media. He responded, clearly upset with that grade, and clearly has a point to prove, and he did that on Saturday in qualifying. Just really interesting on the rookies. 5 of the 6 significantly underperformed, and clearly in really, really challenging conditions for the first time kind of driving a Formula 1 car off the back of a day and a half's testing in the car to come out in those conditions. They clearly struggled. I'm going to start at the back of the grid and work my way forward and speak to each of the team performances. But really interested in hearing your views as well, so please reach out to me. I'm going to start with Haas. Not a lot to talk about here. Just a really quick story. Ollie Beerman came out in free practice 1 within a few laps, put a couple of tyres into the gravel trap. Car kind of jacked a little bit and he ended up in the fence. Sat out all of free practice 2 while his mechanics rebuilt the car. Came out the next day in free practice 3, and within 2 laps stuck his car in the same gravel trap on the same corner. He's clearly taken some learnings out of that experience, I'm sure. But that set him back in terms of performance. But generally, the team qualified 19th and 20th and finished the race 13th and 14th. And just bear in mind, there are only 14 finishes. So not a lot to talk about there with Haas at the moment. Moving forward, Kick Sauber. We're a little bit surprising. As I said, Gabriel Bortoleto in qualifying on Saturday delivered 15th, out-qualified his teammate Nico Hulkenberg. Really impressive first-up performance. But Nico, surprisingly, came through the pack. Clearly an experienced driver, very capable. And for him to come through the pack on wet conditions from 17th to finish 7th and secure significant points for Kick Sauber was a great result for the team and a great start to the season. Talk about the Racing Bulls. Yuki Tsunoda's best qualifying lap in his career to stick that car on 5th. Unfortunately, on race day, fell through the pack and finished 12th. Made some poor decisions around pit stops, which probably compromised his race. But clearly making a statement to the Red Bull senior team about that seat that he was overlooked for. Isaac Hadjar, another one that I spoke about in episode 1, is a bit of a dark horse and has a lot of potential. Isaac qualified 11th, highest of all the rookies, I believe. And really sad story here. The formation lap is the lap before they even start the race, and he crashed. Must have been so devastated on his Formula One debut to stick it in the fence before he even got to the start of the race. Clearly an example of how treacherous the conditions were. The stories that I love, it's the stories around the race itself and the sport itself that draw me in. I loved the scenes in the paddock a few moments after Isaac had crashed the car. He still had his helmet on. He was clearly upset. And for Lewis Hamilton's father to approach him, put an arm around him as any parent would around a child and just console him and give him some positive words, I thought it was a really nice moment. Obviously, Isaac has this history with Lewis. He's always looked up to him and he sees him as a hero. And for Lewis's father, Anthony Hamilton, to just take a moment in the position that he's in, just to put an arm around a young driver and and let him know everything's going to be okay. I thought that was a wonderful moment, so I wanted to acknowledge that. Moving forward to Alpine, Pierre Gasly was arguably the most informed driver in the back half of 2024, and he continued that form and qualified 9th, finished 11th, just out of the points. His teammate, I've spoken extensively about the Aussie, Jack Doohan, qualified 14th, a little bit disappointing, but he was compromised in his qualifying lap with Lewis Hamilton spinning in front of him, so a little bit unlucky there. But again, another rookie who on lap 1 or 2 of the race, sitting behind the safety car, was warming up his tyres and he's crashed out. So he is under immense pressure to even hold that seat, and that doesn't help. So we need to see him bounce back in China. All right, moving forward to Aston Martin. It's going to be a long season for Aston Martin, clearly focused on 2026 and the regulation changes that are coming. They have Adrian Newey on board now as their chief designer. He'll clearly be focused on 2026, but he may be able to add some value to this car in 2025 in terms of performance. Fernando Alonso, two-time world champion, qualified 12th, but crashed out in the race. If you have a look at his interview after the race, incredibly frustrated. And it's going to be a long season for Fernando. Surprisingly, Lance Stroll, his teammate, was right behind him in qualifying, 0.03 of a second slower, and finished the race in P6, bringing home a decent haul of points for the teams. I want to talk about Ferrari. I want to take some time to talk about Ferrari. Really disappointing results and really surprising results. They were strong in testing. I genuinely believed after qualifying on Saturday night that they had set their car up for race day. They understood it was going to be wet on race day. They'd compromised the performance of the car in qualifying, and they'd gone for a little bit more of a high downforce setup for the race to give them an advantage. And I genuinely believe they'd come through the pack on race day. And they didn't. Leclerc started the race 7th and finished 8th. Lewis Hamilton started the race 8th and finished 10th. And they both talked about the drivability of the car, which is really surprising. So I'd like to see how that car performs in dry conditions, and we'll probably get that opportunity this weekend in China, but clearly some challenges there for Ferrari. It would be remiss of me not to discuss this really awkward, uncomfortable conversation between Lewis Hamilton, 7 times Formula One world champion, and his new race engineer. It was playing out live in the broadcast. He kept repeating himself. Lewis was politely asking him to be quiet. And then eventually it lost his patience when there was an opportunity to take advantage of that in terms of strategy. It's really surprising with the off season that they've had and the amount of preparation that they've done that they haven't resolved what I would call communication protocols. That was really surprising. There was clearly some tension there and obviously some debrief required to work through that. But I would not be surprised, again, mark my words here, by the end of the year if Lewis has made a change, or maybe he's tried to poach his race engineer Bono from Mercedes, who he has a long-term relationship with and has had a lot of success with. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some changes in that space throughout the year. Moving forward to Williams, this for me was the highlight story of the weekend, just in terms of their performance. We saw some speed in testing, but it's one thing to demonstrate that in testing. It's another thing to see that over the course of a race weekend. To have two cars qualify in the top 10 was incredible. Alex Albon qualifying 6th, Carlos Sainz qualifying 10th. Albon had a really strong race and finished 5th and brought home points for the team, which is significant at this time of the year and a great start. I think we're going to see the best of Alex Albon this season. This is the first time that he's had a competitive teammate for the last few years in a Williams car, and I'm pretty sure that that'll help him step up his game. Carlos Sainz was settling in for a points haul himself, and then he had a torque surge, a power surge under a safety car conditions. I think that's a code for being a bit heavy-footed on the accelerator, and unfortunately he crashed out. Moving forward to Mercedes, they had a pretty quiet weekend. George Russell was rock solid, qualified 4th, finished 3rd on the podium. Kimi Antonelli, 18 years old, started the race 16th and finished 4th. For me, he was driver of the day. The team took home 27 points, the same as McLaren. They sit top of the Constructors' Championship after round 1, and I'm sure they'll be really happy with that start to the season. Moving forward to Red Bull, yin-yang performances here. Max Verstappen is an animal. We're going to see the very best of him in 2025 because he clearly is driving in a car that is inferior to the McLaren, and he wrung its neck. For him to be competing throughout that race with the McLarens was incredible. Clearly in dry conditions, I think he would have struggled a little bit more, but he was highly competitive. And I think with a couple more laps in the race, he would have run down Lando Norris. He was hunting him down at the end and had a superior tyre advantage as well. So great to see Max under pressure, having to deliver in a car that at the moment isn't performing its absolute best. On the other hand, Liam Lawson's debut for the Red Bull senior team was really disappointing. So in his defense, he sat out FP3 with mechanical issues. He missed an hour of running just to be sitting there in the garage watching other teams setting up their cars for qualifying, and must have been incredibly frustrating. And clearly he didn't perform in qualifying, started the race in 18th and at one stage was in the top 10, but crashed out, taking a risk and staying on slick tyres when he probably should have come into the pits and put some intermediate tyres on. I'm sure he will bounce back next weekend in China. And interestingly, Helmut Marko has come out in his defense, which he doesn't always do with his drivers, and said that, we'll look at a body of, 4 or 5 races in terms of Liam's performance before we start making any assessments. The team's giving him time, which is great. But again, the rumors start to circulate around the curse that is the second Red Bull seat at and whether any driver can perform in that seat. All right, moving forward to McLaren. Lando Norris qualified on pole, finished 1st. I know I brought this up in episode 1 around his ability to be able to handle the pressure this year as the favourite. He clearly did that. The momentum starts to build. The British media hype is already started. So let's see if he can continue to live with that pressure throughout the season. Oscar Piastri, again, as I said, perfect performance throughout, with the exception of one corner on one lap late in the race, which cost him 2nd place. He eventually finished 9th. The interesting thing for me was how he bounced back in the last 2 laps. He made up some places, got himself back in the points, and that overtake at turn 9 on the last lap of the race on Lewis Hamilton was awesome. If he drives like that next weekend in China, I think he'll be able to reverse the order with Lando. We have got a genuine title fight. We've got McLaren as the fastest car, as we said, maybe 3 or 4 tenths quicker than any other team at the moment. We've got 2 drivers that are number ones, and the team have prepared to treat them as number ones. It's game on. I just wanted to finish off with some comments around the race itself and the fact we started under wet conditions. The track dried. We had a dry racing line, then we had more rain. When that second lot of rain came, the teams were classifying that as grade 3 rain, which is significant heavy rain for a sustained period of time. And I was just really surprised that teams gambled around staying out on slick tyres as opposed to gambling to come in early and put on some intermediates. And maybe there's this view that part of the track would be wet and part would stay a little bit drier and they could drive through that period of rain. and come out the other side without having to pit again. I was really surprised that no one gambled the other way and thought they could make up lap time by coming in early. So just before I go, I've just had some breaking news in the last couple of hours, which is really interesting. There's clearly been this discussion over a period of time around the flexi wings, both front and rear wings of the cars, and whether McLaren is extracting an advantage in this space. The FIA has just released a statement confirming that they'll have tougher rear wing deflection tests introduced from the Chinese Grand Prix. So initially this was meant to happen after the Spanish Grand Prix. There was a regulation to be passed down, but they brought that forward. So there's clearly been some challenges from the other teams. And fair enough, McLaren looked like they were kind of gapping the next best cars by kind of 15, 16, 17 seconds on a drying track on Sunday. So clearly I have a pace advantage. Just some comments here within the statement that I wanted to speak to. After teams were requested to use cameras to monitor the on-track deformations of their cars during the practice sessions in Melbourne, the FIA analysed this footage and concluded that sufficient grounds exist for a tougher test to be introduced on the upper rear wing at the next event in Shanghai, though it was added that all cars in Australia were legal. The statement also went on to say that as has been previously communicated, between the end of 2024 season and the start of the 2025 season, the FIA exercised its authority granted under Article 3.15.1 of the technical regulations to introduce new and more challenging load deflection tests for the front and rear wings. There's clearly been some concerns raised around how they're able to extract more deflection from those wings and therefore greater downforce and performance, and the teams have already pushed back. So let's see what impact those rule changes have on the performance of the cars this weekend in China. Thank you so much for listening. Keep sending me your comments, and I look forward to recapping the Chinese Grand Prix next week. Thanks.